Hi, this is Aaron Azrod, and welcome to the 131st episode of the Truth Island podcast. Last week, Kenny and I began our discussion of what exactly constitutes evil, but ended up spending more time on what makes a good person than what makes a bad. If you haven't listened to that discussion already, it is recommended you do so first before continuing on to this one. Just to recap from last time, while we had some disagreements, some key takeaways that we arrived in our last discussion were that good people are generally, one, secure in their identity, and two, have a strong love for others. We can imagine that our good person does not harbor too many inward thoughts, especially in the domains of obtaining material goods, fame, fortune, and any of the other shallow pitfalls of forging an identity for oneself. While our good person does show consideration and generosity towards others, this generosity is not without its boundaries. Flipping the tables as to what makes a bad person, it is tempting to assume that the very opposite is true. However, like most things, life gets complicated when each person wakes up believing they are the hero of their own adventure. Joining me to help continue our conversation, I am once again joined by Kenny. You know, Kenny, I was listening to our conversation last week and began thinking of the quote, "Man feels compelled to destroy that which he cannot have." How does that quote sound to you when starting to talk about bad people? Do you think that quote is going to lead us anywhere?
Yeah, I think it will. I think that's the very nature of evil. I think that's the character, at least if not the entirety. I think that's a great part of what makes up the character of an evil person.
I have this vision and I'm getting this idea of evil both from Milton and Lucifer, and I'm also getting this from pretty much every Disney movie that I've ever watched, where you have a villain character, right? And I would say that in these Disney movies, they probably based it off the prototype of Lucifer, who for whatever reason is banished from society, right? Like you always start off with a villain who's been banished, lives in the shadows, lives in a kingdom entirely of them, onto their own. And they typically have access to the good life or heaven or the good people. They can see that, but they can't have it. They're not welcome there. They can't partake upon it. And what ends up happening is a lot of that envy, jealousy starts quickly translating to hatred of like, well, if I can't have that kingdom, if I can't be a part of that kingdom, I must destroy it because everybody in this world must be as miserable as I am. And I think that probably is the originator of a lot of sin and a lot of what would we deem evil. And I don't know, do you have any experiences in your life that kind of speak to that story?
Well, I think we do it when we were kids. I think everybody experiences this as a child. Something along the lines of, I remember situations. I don't know if how true they are. If this is just a work of my imagination, but I could, as a kid, be in situations where we're all playing soccer outside, and the person who brings the ball, because there's usually a person who brings the ball, and everybody else kind of just hopes he
Right?
shows
And
up.
they got to play, right? It's my ball. If you don't let me
Oh,
play, well then how are we gonna
exactly,
have that?
exactly. So that's my point exactly. So the person's holding the ball, and he's threatening you that even if he's a terrible player, he might be the worst player out there. Nobody wants him on the team.
Right.
We know absolutely that if we do not allow this kid to play, we are not. No one's playing. So and so it's obviously it's there's an innocence about it. It's just a matter of desire and a matter of having the power to exact your desire over others. But as kids, we do it in a very immature, childish way. But when we become adults,
Mhm.
that we lose that innocence, and it becomes a very dark thing. So you have the whole culture of Hollywood producers or Hollywood bigwigs demanding how you say sexual favors from young women in order to cast them in a role.
Sure.
Have politicians blackmailing one another or doing despicable things in order to to make sure that they hold the people who are going to be favorable to them and so forth. But so I'd say that we do these things every day on a very minor scale, sure, but it's also happening on a very major scale.
Okay, I think this is a good place to go because I want to talk about our banished individual. Okay, so we have this archetype of an individual who is banished, and there's two reasons why an individual gets banished. Sometimes it's not the individual's fault. Sometimes the in-group is really cruel and they're really mean, or maybe they're partaking in something that's particularly fiendish or nasty. I can imagine like a gang telling someone, no, 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 you don't belong here. Get the hell out of here. We don't want you here. You're not gonna help us rob this bank or something, right? So sometimes because we automatically assumed that the person being banished is the evil one, right? And we always think that the in-group must be the good group, right? But sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's actually the person that's being banished who isn't quote unquote nasty enough to kind of hang with the bad boys. So that does happen. And then in other instances, sometimes that person is just being really, really particularly difficult. They're being selfish. They're like, this is my ball and we're going to play soccer under my rules and blah, blah, and then that person is being so difficult that they need to be banished or they need to just spend some time alone. And then they can come back to the group and then they can kind of readjust their behavior so that they better fit in. So it's very, very, very confusing because sometimes you have individuals that are banished, but it's for really good reasons, like they're actually in the right and everyone else is in the wrong. And then in other times, that person needs to kind of sort themselves out and then rejoin the group. So I think that's something that is kind of missing in a lot of these cliche Disney type movies, is that there is nuance there. It's not just a black and white situation.
Oh no, absolutely. I think just evil is often banished, but not every person who's banished is evil. Nothing sells a good. Nothing sells a family dispute like a good banishing. But that's what grounding is. Grounding is being banished to your room for a duration of time. But no, it's so the films. So for the Disney villains are very. I mean, I think they're a good representation of what the core of evil. I mean, they're obviously not. They're kind of caricatures because kids gotta have to understand what's going on. But most of the time, evil is far more complex and far more evil doesn't walk around with flaming hair, you know or tentacles or wearing a red leotard. It just it looks like you and me. It looks like anybody on the street. But I think that evil occurs really begins to seep in to the human experience or to the human soul when it's my will be done, when it's all about me doing, getting, living what I want, how I want, and so forth. And when people become instruments that we use to acquire whatever it is we desire, I think we are on a very bad path. I wouldn't say the person is necessarily evil, because I think that evil is we'll get there, because I think evil gets to a very dark place. But I think that's the road. That's how it begins.
Just listening to what you're saying, I think that one way that maybe we can see if the banishment is a rightful banishing or like a not a rightful banishing is perhaps the conditions which are levied upon the person that's banished, right? So I think that if you banish somebody or you say, hey, you need to take a time out, hey, we're not inviting you next week, I think that for that party to be good, they have to give some kind of conditions as to why that person's being banished. It has to be like, hey man, you acted really disrespectful at that party last week. You said some really inappropriate things. We just don't feel comfortable having you here. So I think when the in group gives the person being banished some really solid reasons why you're not coming back, well then that protects the integrity of the in group, because now there's something that the bad person can work on. And if that bad person doesn't want to improve themselves and they're like, no, I'm happy being a drunk asshole and I'm going to act the way that I want to act, well then that person is making themselves into a villain. I think when the in-group banishes somebody without any good provocation or any good reason, it's just like, we hate you. There's nothing that you can do to change. It's just the very look of you is something that repulses us. I think that might be a good indication that it's actually the in-group that needs changing, and that the person being banished might actually have something to offer, and they're kind of afraid of that.
Yeah, that's usually the case. I mean, I would say that's both sides. Both sides could be easily banished. A legitimate, caring, and kind person could very well absolutely be banished by people who don't care, or who are jealous, or who just don't understand what the hell he's about. And a truly wicked man can be banished by people who, at least, who consider themselves to uphold some sort of moral standard or some sort of societal standard and so forth. And so yeah, absolutely. It doesn't, when it comes to being banished, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, anyone could be banished. Anyone could be treated as though they were evil. That's one of the things, one of the things the law, the judicial system is there for, is to make sure that no one is treated as evil when they are not in fact evil. But of course, it doesn't always work. We have people who spend years in prison for a crime they didn't commit.
Sure.
Because whenever human beings are involved, we're always going to make we're either going to pervert the law, knowing fully well we're perverting the law, or we're going to do it accidentally because we make mistakes. One paper gets shifted to the wrong file, or lost in mail, or words lost in translation, and human beings pay for that with their lives. But when it comes to evil, when it comes to dealing with evil, either an evil society or an evil person, that's a good question. So what constitutes what? So I know fully well. I believe that an evil person begins, either evil of a person begins with with a care, or should I say a just selfness, a very selfish disposition. I know, and it's not necessarily, it's a very selfish disposition, because from there all kinds of unkindnesses, all kinds of wickedness comes out. But an evil society, how does an evil society come about? What constitutes an evil society? How do we judge that? Do we judge that based on our own laws? Just because one nation's law is different from another doesn't necessarily make it evil.
Oh yeah. We're gonna definitely talk about evil society, but I want to nail down this evil individual, and I think once we get the evil individual, then we'll see how we can form an evil society. So I think moving back to our banished individual, I like what you just said about the inwardness, right? So if someone is banished, they have this extreme, if they're an evil person, they have this extreme inwardness of like, it's not fair. I want the game to go this way. I want the rules to be that as such. Typically it's a statement like, I want to be the leader of this, right? I don't like following this other person's rules, or I don't like following the group's rules. I want my rules to be the one that reign supreme. So there's this very, very deep inwardness where the evil individual wants supreme control over the situation. They want their rules to reign supreme, and maybe they themselves as an individual want to be the center of attention, right? I think that there's that this idea that like not only do I want my rules to reign supreme, I also want to be the shot caller. I want all eyes on me, all ears listening to what I have to say. I am the focal point of control and the focal point of attention. And I think that I think whether you might have a very good cause, maybe there's something that you might have a noble purpose, but I think that type of inwardness, even if your desires or your end goal is something beautiful, I think there's something very, very, very dangerous in wanting that level of control, even if you have beautiful egalitarian ideals. I think that having that inwardness of you being the center of control, I think that right there is like the seed of where evil is born.
Yeah, because what you just described is man trying to be God.
Yes.
It's a human trying to have ultimate godlike power over everybody and anybody around him. So, in order to accomplish that, you need an incredible amount of power. And if you don't have that kind of power, you'll go through all sorts of means, all sorts of, strange and devious means to control people. So you have this, slithery, slimy way of manipulation, lies and deception. And that those things are not, how you say, they're just not what you're looking for in a mate. You know what I mean?
Right.
That kind of mind is incredibly dangerous when you want to have that kind of control over people. It's no human being is supposed to have that kind of control over another human being. To do that, well, yes, I would say that if you can accomplish, you don't want to accomplish it, but if you accomplish it, you're dealing with very dark things.
Now, a lot of, again, like I really do subscribe to the theory that no one wakes up in the morning thinking they're evil. So if you talk to one of these control freak evil people and you got a cup of coffee with them and you sat down and talked with them, they would probably say wondrous, beautiful things like, I just want to create a just world. I just want to create a world where, we all have access to this and we can live in peace. We can live in harmony with one another. And I have the answers. I can do it. I know. If you just follow me, I will show us the way. Like, I think a lot of these individuals, when they wake up in the morning, they don't actually think to themselves like, I want to slaughter as many people as humanly possible. Like I actually don't think that that's what's going through their mind, because when we talk about a lot of these crazy sociopaths, we have this vision of, oh, this guy must have been torturing dogs and cats when he was a kid, or or freezing ants and doing all this sorts of nasty stuff. I actually think that a lot of evil is just generated by virtue of having what you think to be extremely pure intentions. You really label yourself in your way as the most compassionate way on earth, but it has to be your way. There's no other way other than your way. And I think that's what kind of blinds us to all of this, is because a lot of these people, you talk with them, you get a cup of coffee, and they seem like really, really idealistic, noble creatures of heaven. But when you actually discover that you have to surrender everything you believe and follow what they believe, that's where the danger lies.
Yeah, because there's a kind of righteousness that there's a humanly righteousness that I've noticed does that. There's a kind of desire for the ultimate good, not just for yourself but for other people, that turns a man into that kind of evil. Because to him, and he this doesn't have to be religious. This could be political. This could be even opinion about music, about the purest form of music, the purest form of intellectual conversations, or purest form of literature, the purest form of anything. If you think that you know it all and that you are the prophets of that idea, you will be willing, if you're not careful, you will be willing to do unspeakable things for that idea. And so, I find that this is why it's very hard to have an argument with a human being who does not in any way consider the possibility that he or she may be wrong. It's just not, because what you're dealing with a holy war. You're dealing
Yes.
with a person who is right now on a holy pilgrimage, or a crusade in the name of their idea. And to them, you are an infidel. You are an obstructor of holy justice. And the only way to deal with an obstructor of holy justice is to kill them. That's it. There is no other way. You can't, unless your God, your mythical whatever God, comes down and changes his mind. You got to kill him.
I think you're so close, man. You're like rubbing against evil. And I feel
I do
this when
that. I do that every morning.
I feel this a lot when I'm having a discussion with somebody. And I've encountered a lot of these people, like especially in the workforce, where they'll talk to me as if I'm a primitive monkey and be like, Aaron, I just don't think you understand. I just don't think that you understand what we're saying. And it's like the kind of like condescension that you hear. Again, this is not dictator level evil. But in their tone of voice, like the way that they address me and the way that they talk to me is, if you do not think as we think, right? There's something in your thought process that needs to be crushed. Like it needs to, like, our way is going to be the way to utopia. Our way is the way to salvation. Our way is for a happy, united humanity. That's their thinking. So all of their thoughts in the back of their head are pure. Like, if everyone just thinks the way that we think, utopia is straight ahead, right? It's exit 12, like it's coming up in a quarter of a mile. That's their thinking, right? That if everyone just gets on board with the way that we think, utopia is around the corner. And in that process, there's absolutely no attempt to understand what another human being is trying to convey, right? Like, I think that's how it starts. I think that's how evil light begins to start, is that there's just there, you don't have to, again, when you're arguing with someone, you don't have to just lay down like a doormat and just be like, okay, I surrender. But if you're not even trying to understand that there might be intelligence outside of your own intelligence, I think right there you're already like a 3 steps into you're 3 steps on the way to evil.
That's the whole thing with, we see it quite a lot today. We have, often two sides battering each other with different ideas, and
Yes.
both sides believe they're absolutely correct, and nobody on the other side, on either side, on the opposing side, knows anything, knows anything on what the hell they're talking about. And so, this is a very real thing that we can actually see just looking out, staring out our windows today. And so the problem, unfortunately, most of the solutions to most things is love. It's the only thing that's, how you say, is the only thing that makes you at least aware of yourself to the point of knowing that you may be wrong about something, or at
Right.
least if you know you're not wrong, to give the other person at least the benefit of the doubt, to say they might see something you do not see. The point is simply that I believe you're absolutely right. It's evil does not always, it doesn't look like Hades, it doesn't look like Ursula, it doesn't look like Scar. Sure, there is evil like that. There is absolutely evil like that. The person who robs you and commits all kinds of crimes and things like that, for sure, yeah. But there's a different kind of evil, and this kind of evil is actually, I think, is far more dangerous. The evil that is brought about by the pursuit of something good, something pure, something righteous, and so forth. You know.
Yeah, because again, there might be a few sociopaths out there who are like, I just want to see the world burn and I want to see everyone suffer. Okay, hey, maybe there's your 1 to 2% of the population that is actually like that. But I think that if you look at our examples, and we're kind of moving into the larger society stuff, like Soviet Union Gulag evil, for example, all of those people thought that they were doing something incredibly virtuous. They thought they were liberating the farmers or the proletariat. They thought that, again, the ideology said, this is the road to heaven, right? Like, this is the road to heaven where we're going to liberate all of these people. And yeah, some people might die along the way, but ultimately our vision for what the world will look like will be so beautiful that we're going to have to break a few eggs in order to get there, but it's going to end up all right. So I think that when we're talking about evil, it's not in that sinister, I want to see the world burn down kind of manifestation. I think it's more of the lines of, like, I have a beautiful, wondrous image of what humanity is going to look like. The only problem is I have to be the center of that universe. I have to be the sun, right? It's this idea that I have to be the sun in order for the universe to be as beautiful as it can be.
Yeah, that's yes, and everything a person like that does totally is going against nature. First of all, so let's just look at the whole idea of the, what's it called, the utopia. Well, if you know anything about human nature, you know that a utopia is a far-fetched idea. I mean, you have a better chance of throwing the beaver into the air and having it explode than you have of ever creating a utopia without controlling human beings. Now, if we've looked at human nature, we find that this is not possible, so we want to control them. If we control them, we can make all things well. Well, you're controlling people, bro. you're not dealing with actual people. You're dealing with either robots. You're dealing with instruments of your own, some weird manipulation, and you're not dealing with actual everyday human beings. And so, what at what costs? What cost do you accomplish these things, these high and lofty ideas, and these we're going to change the world. What cost?
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Because I think that another part of evil is that it fails to love humanity for what it is.
Yes.
It fails to love humans in their natural state. Because I think a lot of evil, again, and I've actually been really thinking about this for the past week since our last discussion, because I really wanted to get this conversation right, is that I think that control is absolutely a part of this equation. And what's the hardest thing to control in this world? Humans, right? Like, humans are the hardest thing to control in this world. We're unpredictable. We have moods. We vacillate from day to day. So I think a part of that evil is to control humans. But in order to control humans, you have to turn the humans into less than what they actually are. You have to program them in such a way to be obedient, so that you kind of negate their natural human reflexes in order to get the desired outcomes that you wish.
Yes. Yes. You absolutely have to do that, because if you don't, they're going to give you hell. And if you don't want you, yeah, so you have to castrate them,
Mhm.
basically. I totally agree with this. I think that it comes down. I can say that it comes down to control. There's a certain
Mm.
amount of control that one person wants to. I mean, yeah, it's there's a certain amount, and this is why any man, the everyday man, is capable of evil. Anyone is capable of evil. Even parents amongst each other, with their children, with friends. I mean, people. This is this is crazy. I think it's a very dangerous thing to want to control, to want to play God over people, things, and situations. I think you will find yourself saying things or doing things that look closer to the darkness than any light.
Hmm. Well, let's even, I think let's even take the magnifying glass and put it even closer on this individual, because you'll talk to them, you'll get a nice cup of tea with them, very friendly. But when they say, I just want to help people, I just want to control them, it's also in what the evil is, not in what they're saying, it's also in what they're not saying. Is that they're saying inherently they are superior to everyone else, because they believe that they are superior to everyone else because they are the only pathway to saving humanity, right? Which automatically means that they believe that they are a part of the chosen, or they're a part of the elect, right? They believe that their essence and that they were created differently than everyone else. They're special, they're unique, they have divine destiny, and that only them fulfilling their divine destiny is what can actually save and liberate humanity, which means that they have a special complex. They have a complex which suggests that they are better and superior to that of all other humans, because that's what they're not saying. Because if that person outwardly told you over that cup of coffee, hey,
Mm.
by the way, Kenny, I'm special. I'm
Oh.
special, right? You would be like, get the hell away from me, you
Mm.
psychopath. And you would just quietly walk away. So what they do is they basically use the language of control and the language of helping people as a covert way of expressing their specialness.
Yes, I mean, oh brother, this is yeah. Because I mean, think about it, right? We so there are two ways of doing good things. There's the very overt way of, hey, look at how good I am, and how many people I've fed 300 babies in Africa. Well, whoopty freaking do, well done. And then there's the way of people who absolutely go to their graves and nobody ever knows what they did, ever.
Right.
So the big question is, okay, people who, and it's weird. It's weird because anybody who advertises what good they do. I mean, look at Twitter. That's
Yeah.
that's that's all that's happening. That's a lot of what's happening. Is it if anybody who goes around advertising the good things that they do, is suspect. Is suspect, because what they're saying is, There is a good. I've accomplished the good. But I want you to know that I've accomplished the good. The question now is, why do you want me to know? Why do you want me to know that you've accomplished the good? Well, I want you to see me in a certain way. I want you to see me in a certain light. I want you to see me in such a way that I could have a certain kind of authority over you. Because we all know that good people, good people are listened to. We all know that there's a cachet, there's a certain feeling, there's a certain look that we have, or certain endearments we have towards good people who accomplish great things, right? Good things for other people. So we want to tap into that, and we're going to use that to get what we want from you.
Absolutely. And I think if you speak to anyone on Twitter, all of them think they're great people. All of them think that they are accomplishing, quote unquote, the good. All of them will say that. And some of them will have really convincing arguments like, well, I helped this this village out here, I've donated, blah, blah, blah. And on paper, all of those things might actually be good, right? Like if you're a serial killer, you're probably not advertising that on Twitter. You're advertising the best possible persona of yourself. But you're absolutely right. Like your reasons for doing that is so that your status can be escalated, right? You're doing it because if you really just cared about doing those things, you would quietly do it. You would do your job, quietly do it, and then go home for the night. But instead, you do those things and then you advertise them because you want your social status, you want your esteem to raise in the eyes and ears of others so that you can better control them. Because then they'll be like, well, hey, look at that man. He's donated, over $1 billion and blah, blah, blah. He must be a good person. I think we ought to listen to what he says, right? It's not being done for purely good reasons. It's being done so that you can convince more people that you are virtuous and a saint-like figure and should be listened to more. And I hate to say it, but and this is actually quite paradoxical because I think a lot of good things do happen through this channel. But on the other hand, I think that the motivations for doing a lot of these things aren't all that pure.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's people, man. It's people, is what we do. And so the more I think about it, I think we're living in a very backwards world. It's just we do everything upside down and backwards, and it's strange. We live in a very strange world, in a world where so this is why it's almost like evil is not just one. It's like there's different gradients or different cores of evil, right? And it's hard to find all of those gradients, all of those cores in one solid person or one solid entity or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's scattered throughout our experience. It's scattered throughout people in different ways.
I'm going to play a little devil's advocate, literally devil's advocate. And let's say we have one of these quote unquote people on Twitter and they say, yeah, I'm braggadocious. Yeah, I advertised that I, donated $1 million to this coat charity drive. And they'll say, well, Kenny, if I don't advertise about this good thing I'm doing, then other people won't know of it, or they won't be able to participate in it, or they won't be able to donate to this thing, or they won't be able to contribute to the GoFundMe page or whatever it is. And there's a valid point to be said about that if you're just quietly and nicely doing something, you are helpful. Like, don't get me wrong, that is a beautiful thing. But then you don't necessarily give other people the opportunity to contribute to that thing as well, because you're just quietly doing this and no one really knows about it. Whereas if you advertise it, if you market it, then people can know about it and be game for it. I even think of something that Jordan Peterson said. He said, we all think that marketing is pure evil, but if you want to help people, you got to let them know that you're out there, right? You got to let them know that you exist in the world. Otherwise, they'll never know what the hell it is that you have to offer. And there's a really valid point to be said about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, for example, I think there's a difference.
Okay.
So the idea of saying, okay, hey, I've been doing this thing quietly for the past few years, and I believe that I can do it on a bigger scale. I believe that I don't think I have enough, or have enough time or resources or whatever it may be to do this as much as I'd like to do it, to accomplish the what I'd like to accomplish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a group of people that I once, who I believe are capable of helping, and see what comes of it. Well, what you're doing there is saying, listen, guys, this is the situation. There is this problem here. There's and there these are the ways that we can meet the needs, meet the problems. Do you mind? Would you mind backing me up? Would you mind helping me? And people say, yeah, hell yeah, I would like to help you. Hell yeah, I would like to back you up. There's a difference between that and saying, hello, everybody. I've been doing this for the past 50 years. And then you go through all the list of the people you've helped and how wonderful they're doing and how wonderful you were when doing it and how wonderful you felt when you were doing it and so forth and back forth. And all you're doing there is, well, blowing your own ego up, or talking about how helpful you are. The problem is not talking about the problem. The problem is talking about you and how well you address the problem, and wanting people to, I don't know, may either trust you, or wanting people to want to have that envy, so that they feel they want to be on stage someday saying these things.
Mm-hmm,
You know what I mean? So I don't think there's anything wrong with advertising, but the problem is stick to the points. Advertising is, this is what's going on. This is how you can help. Are you going to help? If so, here's how you help. If not, God bless you.
Okay, this is a really, and I give you a lot of credit because this is a very tough distinction to make. So it's okay to advertise, but it really depends on where the spotlight of that advertising is located. So if the spotlight is located on the actual charitable deed, so if I get on Twitter or whatever it is and say, for $5 a month you can help blah blah blah, well, that spotlight, that attention is now being focused on the actual person or the actual thing that needs help, right? So for $5 a month, you can give little Johnny here a jacket. I'm not focusing on myself. I'm focusing on the $5, and I'm focusing on the coat and the jacket and being warm and all that good stuff. But the second I twist that and say, well, in 2017, I traveled down here and I, led the campaign to blah, blah, blah. When you have too many of those I statements, then the purity of what you're trying to achieve is being diluted and destroyed because you're focusing on I statements instead of the actual cause itself.
Yeah.
Now that we've I think we've done a really, man, I think in like 40 minutes, maybe less, we've done a really good job of painting a picture of a very evil person. And it's nothing like the, animal cruelty psychopath of our movies. It's actually a lot closer to what we need to look out for. And a lot of people are blind. A lot of people don't even see the train coming. They're completely blind. They're like, wow, look how amazing this person is, blah, 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 right? I think we've done a service right there. Let's talk about how that evil now transmits to the larger, like to how a society becomes evil, because I think that's the next layer on this. And I'm going to start by saying I think that we have our idealistic individual who's now transferred away from the actual good that they were doing onto the good that they are themselves. And now they come to be in a position of power. They're in this position of power, and they want everything to look exactly the way that they want to. And I'll even give you a small microcosm of this. Imagine you're an incredibly rich housewife, okay? Incredibly rich.
Do like that.
Right? I love housewives, but let's just go with, the cliche, like very rich, very spoiled housewife. And she's having some renovations done on her apartment, right? And she's like, that has to go there. That lamp has to go here, right? It's that desire of like, I need like in order to get to the greatest good, I and my vision must be in absolute control. And I think that on the macro level, that it's an individual who is like, schools must look like this. We must have this in the educational curriculum. Teachers all must do this. Police officers all must act this way. Everyone, we need to have a tax code that does it. Like they have their hands so tightly on the wheel with every single decision. That's why, if you read history, every single dictator was an ultra micromanager. They would basically dictate the curtains. They would dictate the curtains of their palace, right? And you would think, well, come on, dude, you have a whole country to run, you have a whole nation to run. But if the curtains were not the way that they wanted to, if the soup was not as hot as they would have liked, they threw a tantrum. So I think that it's that desire. It begins at the household level and then it extends to an entire state where you want absolute control over every little facet and every little detail of everything. It's this idea that every decision must go through me.
Yeah, I mean, you just yeah, exact. That's tyrannical governments.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that is in fact what an evil government or an evil nation or evil society, or if not the society at least, because the society could be filled with people who know absolutely that this is all bollocks. And evil rulers. That's how evil rulers, run a society. Now, I think that's yeah, I think that's how it looks, and that kind of and it's unsustainable.
Yeah, it's not.
Unsustainable because once the ruler dies, even while he's alive, there's going to be he's going to have to in order for him to maintain this amount of control. The things he's going to have to do it's terrifying because a lot of people are going to have to be killed. You're going to have to be killed because one thing I know about humans is that we don't take jack squat lying down. Not many of us do. A lot of us are very, how you say, non-conformants, right? We smoke cigarettes, all right? We don't care. We know it's gonna kill us, but we still smoke it. That's just how badass humans are most of the time, right? We
Hmm.
don't give them credit, but yes, they are badass. So the point is simply that you're gonna have to kill a lot of humans to accomplish that. There's no way in hell you will have a government trying to execute that amount of control, and it's not built on the blood on the blood of humans, on the lives of many humans.
I love this. I think we should actually use the example of cigarettes or something like that as an example, because let's say I'm absolute dictator of the universe and I say no one's ever going to be allowed to smoke again, right? Or I patent. And again, on the theoretical level, it sounds like a very beautiful thing, right? Like, wow, look at this man. He cares about our health. He doesn't want anyone to ever smoke a cigarette again, right? Sounds glorious, sounds on paper very virtuous. But then the question becomes, well, how exactly is he enforcing that? Is it a fine? Is it a penalty? And then let's say I have a fine, okay, great. But still, some people don't care. They still are smoking cigarettes anyway. And I'm like, I need them to stop smoking, damn it. Throw them in jail for 10 days. Okay, now we start throwing them in jail for 10 days. And they get out of jail and they start smoking again. And I'm like, 30 days, a year. 5 years, 10 years, off with their head, right? So that's how it kind of escalates of I want this virtuous thing. I want everyone to stop smoking. It's a
Yeah,
beautiful, theoretically virtuous thing. But
yeah,
the means and the way in which I enforce that beautiful thing is what's going to ultimately turn me into a tyrant. Again, laws need to be enforced. I fully agree with that. But if the way that you enforce the law becomes too draconian, that's when the evil starts coming out.
yeah, yeah. I think so. I mean, that's one of my friends says that his father, when they were growing up, had laws, household laws, right, laws for their family, and he says that his one thing that was very helpful that his dad took into account very when they were very young was that he never made laws that were against your conscience. So if the kids wanted to smoke when they were 16, they could. They could because first of all, they're old enough to smoke. Oh, that was back then, I think. They're old enough to smoke. And what does that have to do with him? It's the in the grand scheme of life, he can't control every single thing that they do. And so the point is simply that there are laws, there's a way to rule, there's a way a government operates or a ruler operates that where he believes or it believes that it is the source of ultimate good. And it knows best, right? When the government steps into your life and says it knows best for you, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
like a like a parent, and that's what makes it so bad.
Right.
is that you're dealing with adults, people who are grown as people, and you're coming in and treating them like children. And you want to make sure that they obey you. You want to make sure that you break them and turn twist them to fit your mold. Not only are you going to have a rebellion that you're going to that's sure you have to answer with brute force,
Hmm.
but it turns you into a wild animal. It turns the maker of those laws, it turns the enforcers of those laws into wild animals.
I love
Because
that. Wow.
when you make laws that go against the basic human urges, the basic nature. No, I'm talking about perverse nature. I'm talking about the basic human nature of either sociability. I'm talking about parent interaction, parent-child interaction. When a government steps in and tells parents how to raise their kids, that's messed up.
Mm, mm, mm.
When the government tells you what you can and can't put into your body, that's messed up. So those kinds of things, when government oversteps like that, it's pushing the boundaries of tyranny, and usually governments like that are overthrown.
Okay, I wanna. I think that a lot. I think first off, there's a lot of I would say like maybe the beginnings of evil in people who are overly critical. And again, maybe they have evil light, like they're not in a position of power, but sometimes you see this with. I have nothing against being a vegan or a vegetarian. God bless these people. Thank you for keeping the animals alive or whatever it is you're doing. And
Well,
if I and like if I'm talking with a vegan, fantastic. If they want to share some recipes, if they want to share how their lifestyle has enhanced them, excellent. However, things start to cross a line when they start looking at me eating a hamburger with disdain, where they're like, how could you eat that? Because now what they're doing is they're projecting. They're projecting a form of inferiority on me by virtue of my behavior. So if I eat this hamburger and I enjoy it, I am primitive. I am a barbarian. I am a primate, whatever it is. And they're thinking if you don't follow this virtuous road, if you don't follow the virtuous road, you are a savage. And that actually gives people the license to do some pretty incredibly wicked stuff because you've now taken away my humanity by virtue of me eating this hamburger, because now you think that, oh well, he's a savage, he's a barbarian, therefore we can be more oppressive in the way that we restrict this person, because if they're not following this way, the vegan way, the most pure or superior way, they are therefore evil. And again, I love vegans, love their lifestyle, and God bless them. I'm just using them as an example in this case.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a very, how do I say this lightly? That's a very bastard thing to do, because at the end of the day, you don't judge. First of all, yeah, I do agree with you that a person who becomes very critical, very like overly critical, begins to and personally, it's something I have to watch out for, because I have a mind that's always attaching itself to things that I see
Sure.
and trying to analyze, okay, what's going on here? What does this mean? Right? And often what could happen is you start looking at life, I start looking at life through very I become too critical, in the sense of there's nothing wrong with understanding the world,
Sure.
but to assign too much judgment to it can make you a very unhappy person. It can make you a very dark person.
Yes, yes. And again, it could be in the type of person who's like, I don't like sports, right? Like you have that kind of person. I don't like sports. And not only do I not like sports, I am going to judge everyone who does like that. I'm like, oh, you watch ESPN Zone,
Yeah.
savage beast. How, like here I am reading my Tolstoy or whatever, like that, because that's a very dangerous mindset to go, because you believe that your lifestyle, your choices are the correct ones, right? So you absolutely believe that your preferences, your choices in the world are the purest things. They are closer to divinity. They are closer to what God wants. And that gives you license to do some pretty damn awful stuff. Because if you could be just a critical person, right? And you go on to Reddit and talk about how you hate people who like sports, or you hate people who like hamburgers or whatever, right? But then, God forbid, you're given any kind of ounce of power, oh my goodness, what are you going to do with the world? Like you're now going to be in a position where you can basically extrapolate your vision of the world onto everybody else. And again, it might be something benign. It might be a small fine. It might be like a $50 fine. But if you really take yourself too seriously, right? And I think there's also this correlation between taking yourself too seriously and the amount of evil that you're willing to extract onto others. Because if you don't take yourself too seriously, you'll be like, man, I don't like sports, but hey, man, God bless you. But if you take yourself so seriously, then you're going to start extrapolating huge levels of punishment and abuse onto others who don't live within the confines of your life.
Yeah, because to you, there's a correct way to do things, and your way is the correct way to do things.
Yes,
I
yes.
find this a lot. I do actually find this a lot with the vegans, and it's not how you say, not an attack, but it's just what I've seen. But it happens. It happens with anybody who thinks that they are, far more righteous than human beings. Don't know how to handle righteousness. We are.
Yes.
It turns us into animals. It turns us into something. So it turns us into cruel. I mean, here's the idea, right? I mean, so you have this bunch of righteous people who thought they were absolutely righteous. You thought that they thought that, right? They said, we're wonderful, righteous people, right? And when and when the Christ comes, they kill him. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting. And we human beings don't change.
Yes.
The world changed, and we make it great advancements, right? I mean, technology and medicine and philosophy and so forth, but we don't change inwardly, man. We're still the same as we were 2,000-3,000 years ago, so the point the point is, this thing is still happening, but it's happening, and it's not just happening in the religious circles. It's happening there too, for sure, but it's happening in the everyday man's life. Do you drink I noticed that you put soy milk in your coffee. Yeah. And we do these kinds of things to each other all the time because we think we know best, and we don't have love for each other and so forth. And I think it's a very bastardly thing to do.
I think you touched on the magic word there, and it was the word righteousness. I think that whether you're a religious zealot, whether you're adamant in your like healthy diet, whether you're adamant in your exercise, whether you're adamant in your political views, righteousness is kind of the sword that the evil person uses, right? So I think the evil person uses the sword of righteousness to advocate for their particular brand of humanity, their particular brand of life. And the harder you fight for your way of life, even if it's a pure thing, let's just pretend for a second everybody stopped smoking cigarettes, everyone stopped eating meat, we were all a lot healthier, we were all a lot better, right? Okay, maybe on a theoretical level, we would be a much better off species, right? But the harder you fight for that righteousness, the more evil you become. And I think the more you have your fingers on your own set of righteousness, the more evil, the more tyrannical, the more draconian you're going to become. And I think that's the slippery slope from a $50 fine to the gulag, is that you cannot take your fingers off of the righteousness button. You just keep pressing the righteousness button until everybody conforms. And it's beyond, what's behind the veil, and we said this earlier, is that you exalt yourself to being above every other human being that's ever lived before you, lives presently, and will ever come after you. Your way of life is that exalted, that you are superior than everyone else, and anyone else deviating from that line of living is less than you. And that's really what's behind all of this.
Yeah, and if you look at it, it comes back. So I think we've touched on two things that I absolutely love: is the control,
Yeah,
the how you say the overt advertising of one's righteousness. So, and I think those things go hand in hand, because the person who doesn't eat meat often wants you to know they don't eat meat, which I don't understand that. But It's like, hi, my name's Kenny. Hi, I don't eat meat. Like, no, what's your name? I just asked, like, what's your name? I don't care, what your meat, but it's obvious. It's often like this huge, this big gold chain that they wear that they want you to look at and say, isn't that pretty?
Mm.
That's self-advertising. That's
Yep.
like the advertising, right? It's like they and but that's never enough. They're never enough because let's just say you're a kind person. And they say, oh, you don't eat meat? That's, tell me about that. Then they tell you that you did a lovely story of how they once saw a cow cry and the cow was just so loving. And then the cow died and they cried. And they're like, oh, wow, that's understandable. I can understand that. And now I appreciate the fact you told me that. This is your kind person and you understand that, right? The next thing is you would hope that this person would also understand that you really like hamburgers. You just, but they rarely ever do. They rarely ever understand, like, oh, yeah, I don't eat meat, but he eats meat, That rarely happens, right? It's like, why? Something just came to mind, okay? I don't know if I've ever been so when I know friends of mine who obviously love meat, but whenever they have a vegan friend over, they try to make a specific dish for that person
Sure,
for
an
the
accommodation, yeah.
accommodation. But when a vegan friend has them over, there's no meat. What's up with that?
Because, and to answer that question, it's because in their paradigm, the being the vegetarian is the ideal, right? And that's the ideal, and any deviation from that ideal is impure, right? So that there can be no accommodation. There can be no accommodation for what's impure, right? Because only the pure should survive, and anything that's impure should kind of slowly die away, right? And again,
That's very
what what
interesting.
and
Yeah.
what really is behind all of this is it's hubris. It's just this hubris of like, we are the purity, like our way of life, our practices, our rituals, our habits, our beliefs, everything is quote unquote the purity.
Yes.
Anything that deviates away from that purity must be crushed. And when I say crushed, I mean crushed within the power that I am currently afforded, right? So if you're
Yes.
having a vegan party, you don't have the ability to give out $50 summonses to people who eat hamburgers, but you do have the power to just not have any hamburger dishes at that party. So that's like
Yes.
that's a way of tyrannizing that event and just making it like, well, if you're not on the pure train, then you're not on any train. Get the hell off.
Yes. I'm
Um,
sorry. You're not as pure
I,
as I.
I, I think we've actually done quite an amazing job of actually really picturing our evil person right here. And to kind of summarize here, I think that it's exalting oneself to be, like you said in the very beginning of this conversation, above all humans, and then eventually to some level above God in some way, right? So that's check mark, right? And then once you've exalted yourself to this really, really, really high state, it's then basically forcing everybody to conform to your way, to your exalted state, given whatever power you have. If you're a dictator, well, then you can accomplish a lot in getting people to conform to your way of life. If you're just a petty bureaucrat, it's like raining hell on your employees or whatever. If
Yes.
you're a tyrannical father, it's being a tyrannical father to your two small little kids and forcing them to major in what you want them to major in when they go to college, right? So we all have the ability to be a tyrant within the very confined domains that we operate in. And I think that's our evil person. We look at our Stalins and Hitler, but we all have that potential to be that tyrant. We all know the mom or the dad who has the potential to be. You see the way that they treat their kids, and you see that if given more power, that would escalate. That tyranny would escalate into further domains and basically oppress more people.
Oppressed mob. Absolutely.
And I think now that we have our good person, we have our evil person, I propose that our next conversation be about humility, because I think that humility is actually going to be the antidote to a lot of this self-righteousness and a lot of this evil. So if it's okay with you, I think that should be our next episode. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, my good man.
This concludes the 131st episode of the Truth Island podcast. I'm Aaron Azrod.